right, today I'm going to be talking about Polgreen sight reading, which is on page 113. And I'm using Photo Booth this time, so I hope the video turns out okay. All right, so there's a series of poems here that all are about the kind of either the preparation for the first performance of the what at the time was called the Bridge Tower Sonata, or are the performance themselves. So I want to call your attention to this. Polgreen sight reading is one. The next one is Beethoven Summons His Copyist. And then the other one is Augarden 7 a.m., which is the Bridge Tower premiere. Now I know all this from looking at the chronology and things like that, but also if you remember, there is a series of resources in the module that I created for this book, and that's where I'm getting a lot of this information from about the performance itself. For instance, some interesting things. So Beethoven Summons His Copyist. They were scheduled to perform at 8 o'clock in the morning. So that's where that one is, Augarden 7 a.m. They performed it at 8 o'clock in the morning for the first time, and Beethoven had summoned his copyist, Ferdinand Ries, to finish it off at like 4:30 in the morning. So they were really kind of up against the wall with their performance. Even so much so that there was no time to create additional copies of the music. Okay, so there's just one copy for Beethoven for part of it, and Polgreen was seeing that music for the first time, I think, and reading it over Beethoven's shoulder on the piano. So Beethoven was playing the piano, Bridge Tower was sight reading it, and so that is what's captured here. It's probably the new first or second movement, which he received the day before the performance. So that's what he's doing. Okay. So we're going to walk through this poem, given what we know. This is a really interesting poem about like the creation of music. And one of the things that's important to know about this is that there was no recorded music at this time. So any sort of performance was never captured. We don't have anything of Beethoven or Bridge Tower or anybody like that actually performing music. We don't. That does not exist. So we just have to hear about how those performances went from people that were there. Okay, so here's Polgreen sight reading. I'm just going to read from the book. Harder to play long than fast. It's more than stretching a line. Suspension is what we yearn for. That delicate fulcrum between crash and sheer evaporation, a dissipating breeze. To levitate strands of melodic sound across all the mired avenues we barge along daily. And with that, the strands of melodic sound across all the mired avenues we barge along daily. He's talking about what a lot of us feel music actually does, which is to let us escape from our troubles, the mired avenues that we barge along daily. Okay, so he talks about then the shining wire. The music is a shining wire, so light, so strong, we can just make out. There it goes. And follow, slip note by note along, and fly, float in that radiant web. Okay, really interesting description about what it's like to listen to music, that you're going to fly, float in that radiant web of music. Okay, adagio sostenuto, sustained slowness, not water, but the invisible current of a dove's wing skims. One thing that's kind of fun about her poetry is she likes to include the animal dove because her last name is Dove, so it's a little bit of a play on words she includes in her poems. Not air, but the agency that stirs it. Not light, but spark. No, the dark thread between sparks. How your eye can read a firefly's glimmering trail while the rest of you is long gone, darting leaf to leaf, touching down. So think about music as an art form, especially back then. You know, somebody paints a picture. You can see that. You can go see the Mona Lisa, anything that was even painted before this time. Music, though, you can't. The only record that you have of it would be a score, and you're not going to hear the performance unless you play it yourself. And once you play it, it's gone. Okay, and even to some extent, when we think about recorded music too, you're listening to a song, but as soon as you kind of are working through that song, you've heard it. You don't have any like visual record of that. So even before this, like music was just there. Like if you wanted to hear music, you either had to play it yourself or go to a performance. And if you wanted to hear really good music, you had to go to performances. It's not like today. Today it's really easy to hear lots of good performances. So as the piano poised to intercept that bright cursive, descends, growling with a meteor deliquescence. I'm not sure what that word is. I never looked that up. And then on the back, so we're going to flip the page, and I think there's a deliberate page break here. I think this is, Dove knew where this was going to break. He frightens me. He's talking about Beethoven. I've never heard music like this man's, this sobbing in the midst of triumphal chords, such ambrosial anguish, jigs danced on simmering coals. So think about the word choice here. We talk about, if we're going to do the method with this, we talk about sobbing, anguish, jigs, but they're danced on simmering coals. Okay, there's a lot of emotion in Beethoven's music. He says, I've never heard music like this man's, and then he goes on to support that. Oh, I can play it well enough. Hell, I've been destined to travel these impossible switchbacks. That's kind of cool. Switchbacks is a way that he's describing, both the kind of the way that the music moves from one place to another, but also the back and forth, the switchbacks of the bows. But it's as if I'm skating on his heart. Isn't that cool? That's a really cool way to talk about how it's difficult to play because it's so emotional. It's so tied into him as a person. Blood tracks looping everywhere, incarnadine dips and curves. Okay, and then he says, I'm not making any sense. It's difficult to describe what it's like to play this guy's music. And then Beethoven responds, you're making ultimate sense. That's Beethoven that's what he imagines Beethoven saying. You're making ultimate sense, he seems to say, nodding his rutted, heroic brow. Okay, that Beethoven, Bridge Tower, is the person that can bring his music to life. So again, if you do some research on the sonata, you'll know that not everybody can play it. So one of the difficult things that you have, you're a composer, you don't play every instrument, and you can hear it in your mind. Like a lot of composers can just kind of like sing it out and write it for various instruments, but then the difficulty then lies into finding people that can play it well. And he sees this Bridge Tower guy, recognizes his talent, and say, he can play a lot of the music that I've had going on in my mind. He can do this, like he can play anything. And he becomes kind of like his muse. So it's kind of like, like how Tim Burton used Johnny Depp as an actor for a very long time until they started putting out really crappy movies together, and he moved on to somebody else. I forget who that happens to be. But a lot of people do that. So that's what's going to happen. And then, we're immediately followed with Summon Siscopiast, and then Garden 7 a.m. Is really a cool poem about just how this poem is, or how the performance is interpreted by various people. We'll probably take a look at that maybe next week because it's a really cool cool piece. Okay, and that performance then takes us to the third part, which is the play, which we'll get to next week.